Hello everybody. This week we are making a portrait and we're still using the technique of chiaroscuro. So we'll be focusing on the light and the shadows and creating a strong contrast between the light areas and the dark areas. And to get myself started, I took a picture of my own face so that I could make a self-portrait, a reference photo, and I tried to shine a strong light on one half of my face, casting the other half of my face into shadow. Um, and this will really help me to achieve that chiaroscuro effect. And I'm beginning my drawing with a light sketch, um, making some contour lines to define the shape of my face. So before I really get into adding my color and my values, I am sketching out a light outline where things should go. And I'm using a little trick here. Since I'm going to use paint to color my portrait, I'm drawing my outline using a colored pencil. And the reason that I'm using a colored pencil instead of a regular pencil is so that when I put water on top or paint, which has some water mixed in, it will it will not smear. So first thing that I do when I begin to paint on my portrait, I'm looking for the areas of very, very strong shadow. And I'm starting with black paint, and I'm painting in those really dark areas. So any areas in my reference photo where I see very strong shadow, I'm going ahead and painting that in with my black paint. As I paint, I tend to mix in a little bit of water with my paint, um, just to increase the flow of the paint. So if you're painting and your paint is going onto your canvas or your paper kind of dry and it's looking a little bit scratchy, you may want to just mix in a little bit of water just to increase that flow. So really using my powers of observation to look for and identify the light areas and the dark areas. And wherever I see that very heavy dark shadow, I'm starting by painting that in. So essentially this will begin as a black and white painting. Now that I have the areas of the very strong shadow painted in with my black paint, I'm going to start on the other colors of my portrait. And I'm going to work section by section. Um, and the trick here, since I'm using acrylic paint for this, is that wherever I want to blend my colors together, I want to work while the paint is wet. So that's why I'm going section by section, so that as I uh, as I blend my colors together in each section, the paint isn't drying too quickly, still letting me, you know, work it and mix it together while it's on the canvas. So I'll pick out a color from my skin tone, as well as a darker color that I can use for shadowy areas. And that's what you see me doing right now is I'm working with my darker color and very slowly and gently working that into the wet paint on the canvas, getting in some of those shadows. And all the while, I'm glancing back and forth between the portrait that I'm painting and my reference photo. Very similar to what I did with this darker color, I'm going to do the same thing with a lighter color or a white. Load up my brush and then in the wet paint on the canvas, blend in this highlight color for wherever I see areas that are shiny or have a highlight on them. And once I finish up a section of this painting, I will move on to the next section, starting with that mid-range color that I picked out for my skin tone, and then adding on the darker areas for shadow and the lighter areas for the highlights. So blending in my darker color, working while the paint on the canvas is still wet, and building up those areas of shadow. Similarly, I'm using my light color or a white to add those areas of highlight. And since the layer of paint that I put onto my canvas is still wet, I'm able to blend in these colors that I'm adding. When I paint the lips, I'm doing a very similar thing that I did to the rest of the face, starting with a mid-range color for the color of the lips. Once I've got this mid-range color put in, I'll use a darker color for the areas with stronger shadows. And then also a, uh, a light color like white for some areas of highlight. Moving on to the next section, I'm starting on the hair and beard, and again, I'm picking out a mid-range color for the color of my hair, and then on top of this base coat, I will add my shadows and my highlights. For the shadows in the hair, I'm going to use black again, and I'm always looking at my reference photo, looking back and forth between what I'm working on and uh, and the picture that I took of myself. And again, I'm looking for those very dark areas, and I want to, as close as I can, match that on my canvas. So wherever I see very strong shadows on the beard and the hair, I'm coming back in with more black and adding in those shadows. To finish up the hair and beard, I'm selecting a highlight color, and I'm going to go almost white, maybe a little bit off white. And again, looking for those areas of highlight. So always looking at my reference photo and picking out the areas where the light is shining on the hair, trying to match that on my painting. And last but not least, the sweatshirt. Again, I'm picking out a mid-range color, the color of the sweatshirt, basically, and I'll also select a darker version of the color, maybe a darker blue, as well as some white, and I'll put in those shadows and highlights, and that will be my final touch for this chiaroscuro portrait. While my paint on the canvas is still wet, I will blend in my darker tone for these shadowy areas. And I will blend in some white for the areas of highlight. All right. Thanks for watching.